I found 31 letters from my father in my mother's hall closet. Every single one still sealed. He'd been dead for 9 weeks. For 25 years, I believed he left and never looked back. My mother told me he didn't want us, that he moved to Chattanooga and started a new life. She said I needed to stop waiting for birthday cards that were never going to come. And I believed her. She was my mother. But those letters went back to 1999, the year he left. The very first one was postmarked 6 days after the divorce. The last was dated 11 days before he died. He was right there, writing to me, the entire time, and she made sure I never knew. Now, if you want to hear how I found those letters, what was in them, and what happened the night I read one of them out loud in front of my entire family, go ahead and hit subscribe. Turn on that notification bell, because what my mother did at that gathering, the things she said to my face with 13 people watching, I still can't believe it. And I need you here for all of it. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight, because this one is going to take a minute, and I want to know who's riding with me. My name is Layla Pickens. I'm 34, and I'm a wedding photographer in Nashville. Let me take you back to the summer of 1999, when I was 9 years old, and my whole world cracked in half. Before everything fell apart, I need you to understand what my life looked like, because it wasn't always this. There was a time when I thought we were the kind of family other people envied. We lived in a yellow house on Belcourt Avenue in Nashville. 3 bedrooms, a screened-in porch, a magnolia tree in the front yard that my dad planted the year I was born. My mother, Rochelle Pickens, was a dental office manager. Efficient, put together, hair always done, nails always done. The kind of woman who could smile at you and make you feel like you were the most important person in the room, or the least, depended on the day. My dad, Warren Pickens, was a mechanic, had rough hands, always smelled like engine grease, and he was the gentlest man I have ever known. He used to carry me on his shoulders through the Kroger parking lot and make up songs about whatever we were buying. I remember that. I remember him singing about bananas and orange juice, and me laughing so hard I couldn't breathe. I had a younger sister, Daphne. She was 5 when Dad left. She doesn't remember him the way I do. She only knows the version of him my mother built, which is the version where he doesn't exist. And here's the thing. My mother didn't just erase my dad from our lives. She replaced him with herself, with this whole identity of being the brave, single mother who held it all together after her husband walked out on his family. That was her story. That was the monument she built. And everyone, my grandmother, my aunts, the neighbors, the women at church, everyone worshipped her for it. I was about 11 when I made the mistake of asking about him at Thanksgiving dinner. My mother was in the middle of carving the turkey. The whole family was there. My grandmother, my Aunt Pauline, my cousins. I just said it. I said, "Do you think Daddy's having turkey too?" And Rochelle set down the carving knife, looked at me with this pitying little smile, and said, "Layla, sweetie, your father is probably having turkey with his new family, the one he actually wanted." She said it so gently, like she was being kind, like she was protecting me from something even worse. And I looked around the table and nobody said a word. My grandmother just shook her head. My Aunt Pauline reached over and squeezed my mother's hand, like Rochelle was the one who needed comfort. I didn't ask about him again for 3 years. So here's what I grew up believing, that in June of 1999, my father told my mother he was done, that he packed a suitcase, drove to Chattanooga, and built a new life, that he never called, never wrote, never came back for a birthday or a school play or anything, that he chose to disappear, and my mother filled that empty space with herself. Every single space. She signed up to be a chaperone for every field trip, She was at every school concert, every parent-teacher night. She volunteered at the church bake sale, organized the neighborhood block party, ran the booster club for Daphne's softball team. From the outside, Rochelle Pickens was the definition of a devoted mother. But here's what people didn't see. In private, my mother had this way of making you feel like everything you did was because of her. Not for her, because of her. Like my existence was a debt I was always behind on. I got into the Honor Society in 8th grade, 2003. I came home with the letter, excited. Rochelle read it, put it on the fridge, and said, "Well, that's nice. I had to take a second shift at the dental office 3 times this month so you could keep going to that school, but I'm glad it's paying off for you." Every good thing I earned came with a receipt. When I was maybe 13, something happened that I didn't understand until decades later. My dad's sister, Aunt Gemma, showed up at our house unannounced. I was in the kitchen doing homework. I heard Rochelle open the front door, and the temperature in the house just dropped. You know that feeling when the air changes? Rochelle said, "You're not welcome here, Gemma." And Gemma said something I've never forgotten. She said, "That girl deserves to know, Rochelle. She deserves to know he tried." My mother closed the door, locked it, turned to me and said, "Your Aunt Gemma is a troubled woman. She always has been. Don't listen to a word that comes out of her mouth." I didn't ask what Gemma meant. I was 13. I trusted my mother. But I filed it away. He tried. Those 2 words lived in the back of my brain for 21 years. I just didn't know what to do with them. High school. I threw myself into photography. Got a used Canon Rebel from a pawn shop on Nolensville Pike for $65 when I was 15. It became my whole world. I'd walk around East Nashville taking pictures of everything. Old barns, church steeples, people's front porches. It was the one thing that was just mine. My mother couldn't put a receipt on it. I graduated from Hillsborough High in 2008, applied to the photography program at Middle Tennessee State, got in with a partial scholarship. And Rochelle? She told everyone at church how proud she was. But at home, the night I got the acceptance letter, she sat at the kitchen table and said, "Photography? You know that's not a real career, right? I just hope when this doesn't work out, you'll come back and do something practical. I didn't raise you to be a dreamer, Layla. I raised you to survive." She didn't say congratulations. Not once. Not that night. Not ever. But Daphne got a full wall of her bedroom dedicated to her softball trophies. Daphne got the car for her 16th birthday. Daphne got the tears at graduation, Rochelle, the one who posted photos on Facebook with the caption, "My baby girl did it." I got, "Photography isn't a real career." That's just how it was. 2 daughters, 2 completely different mothers. I got through college. Built a photography portfolio shooting weddings for practically nothing. $200 a wedding in 2011, just to build my book. By 2014, I was charging $800. By 2017, I had a waiting list. I built Pickens Photography from a pawn shop camera and sheer stubbornness. No help from Rochelle. No encouragement. Just the quiet knowledge that if I failed, she'd be the first one to say she told me so. I met Nolan Voss in 2015 at a friend's cookout in Germantown. He was tall, quiet, worked as a park ranger out at Radnor Lake. The kind of guy who listened more than he talked. He didn't try to impress me. He just asked about my photos and actually looked at them. Really looked. We were married by October of 2016. Small ceremony. 22 people. Rochelle wore white. I am not kidding. She wore a cream-colored dress to my wedding, and when I pulled her aside, she laughed and said, "Layla, it's ivory. Don't be dramatic." That was always her word for me. Dramatic. Anytime I had a feeling she didn't like, I was being dramatic. Anytime I pushed back, I was being dramatic. Anytime I asked a question she didn't want to answer, dramatic. By 2018, Nolan and I had our daughter, Margot. Named her after Margot Hemingway. I'd always loved that name, and when I held that baby for the first time, something shifted in me. Not right away. It wasn't some movie moment, but slowly, over those first few months, I started looking at Rochelle differently, because now I was a mother, and I could not imagine. I could not fathom looking at my daughter and making her feel like she owed me something for being alive. I used to sit in the nursery at 2 a.m., feeding Margot in the dark, and I'd think about my dad. I'd wonder if he ever thought about me, if he was still in Chattanooga, if he had other kids, if those kids got the version of him that I was supposed to get, and I'd cry. Not loud, just quiet tears running down my face while my baby slept against my chest. Nolan caught me once, came in at 3 a.m. and found me crying. He asked what was wrong, and I said, "I just keep thinking about my dad." And Nolan, who barely ever pushed about anything, said, "Have you ever tried to find him?" I hadn't, because my mother had spent 20 years convincing me he didn't want to be found. But I want to stop here for a second. If you know what it feels like to grieve someone who's still alive, someone you lost not because they died, but because somebody made sure you couldn't reach them, then you already understand what I'm about to tell you. And if you've ever sat in the dark wondering about a parent you lost too young, I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments, because this next part, this is where I found out everything I believed was wrong. It was March of 2024. Margot was 5, and Rochelle called me on a Tuesday afternoon, which she never did. She always texted. She said she needed help cleaning out the back bedroom because she was thinking about downsizing, selling the house on Belcourt and moving into a smaller place. I drove over after dropping Margot at preschool, and I remember walking through the front door and the house smelled the same. It always smelled the same, like lemon cleaner and that specific candle she kept by the bathroom. We worked for about 3 hours. Old clothes, boxes of magazines, Daphne's old softball equipment. Rochelle was efficient. She had a system: keep, donate, trash. 3 piles. She didn't get sentimental about anything. Around 1:30, I went to the hall closet, the deep one near the back of the house that had never been organized as long as I could remember. And behind a stack of old photo albums and a broken humidifier, I found a shoebox. Gray Nike box. Dusty. I almost didn't open it. I actually called out to Rochelle. I said, "Hey, there's an old shoebox back here. Toss or keep?" And I heard the change in her voice before I saw her face. She said, "Don't open that. Just bring it to me." And something about the way she said it, the sharpness, the speed, made me open it. Inside were envelopes, stacked, neat, every single one addressed to me, Layla Pickens, in handwriting I didn't recognize at first. But the return address, every one of them, said Warren Pickens, Chattanooga, Tennessee. There were 31 of them. I counted later. The first was postmarked July 11th, 1999, 6 days after the divorce was final. The last was postmarked September 3rd, 2023, and not a single one had been opened. I stood there in that hallway holding this box, and I could hear my own heartbeat. Like everything else in the house had gone silent, and Rochelle was standing at the end of the hall, not moving, just watching me. I said, "What is this?" And she said, and I will never forget her voice because it was perfectly calm, perfectly measured. She said, "Those are old letters, Layla. They don't mean what you think they mean." She could have burned them. She could have taken them to the dump any one of 10,000 days, but she kept them, pushed them to the back of a closet she never opened, behind a humidifier that hadn't worked since 2009. Maybe she'd gotten so used to the lie that she forgot the proof was still there. Or maybe some buried piece of Rochelle needed someone to find them, because she couldn't undo what she'd done on her own. 31 letters, 25 years, every single one sealed. He wrote to me. My father wrote to me every year, sometimes twice a year, for a quarter century. And she kept them in a shoebox behind a broken humidifier like they were junk mail. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at her and said, "Did he call too?" And she pressed her lips together. That tight little line she makes when she's deciding what version of the truth to give you. And she said, "He may have called a few times, early on, but I was protecting you, Layla. You were a child. You didn't need someone who walks out one day deciding to play father from 100 miles away. Protecting me by stealing 25 years of my father's words, by making me believe I wasn't worth a phone call, by letting me cry in the dark at 2 a.m. wondering if my own father remembered my name. That's protection?" I took the box home. No one was at work. Margot was still at preschool. I sat on the living room floor. Our apartment on 12th Avenue South. This little 2-bedroom we'd been in since 2019. And I spread the envelopes out on the carpet in front of me. 31 of them. Chronological order. July 1999 to September 2023. I didn't open them yet. I couldn't. I just sat there staring at his handwriting. Warren Pickens. The return address changed 3 times over the years. He'd moved within Chattanooga. But the handwriting was the same. Steady. A little messy. Real. And then I noticed the last envelope. September 3rd, 2023. The one closest to me on the floor. And I picked it up and turned it over. And on the back, which I hadn't seen before, he had written in smaller letters, "In case this is the one you finally read." He knew. He knew she was keeping them from me. He knew I never got them. And he kept writing anyway. I opened that one first. I know, you'd think I'd start from the beginning. But I couldn't wait. I needed to hear his voice, even if it was just ink on paper. The letter was 2 pages. His handwriting got shakier toward the end. He said he was sick. Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed in June of 2023. He said he didn't know how much time he had, but he wanted me to know, in case Rochelle ever let one of these through, that he thought about me every single day of his life since the divorce. He said he remembered the magnolia tree. He remembered carrying me through the Kroger parking lot. He remembered the banana song. He said, "I don't know if you're married. I don't know if you have children. I don't know what you do for a living or what your favorite color is now, or if you still laugh the way you used to, with your whole body. But I know you're out there, Layla Bird, and I need you to know that I never stopped trying." Layla Bird. That was his name for me. I hadn't heard it in 25 years, and I was sitting on the floor of my apartment, shaking, holding a letter from a dead man who called me Layla Bird. He died on September 14th, 2023, 11 days after he wrote that letter. And I found out, not from my mother, not from Daphne, from Aunt Gemma. Gemma called me on October 2nd, 2023, 3 weeks after his funeral, because she assumed I knew. She assumed someone had told me. I said, "Aunt Gemma, what are you talking about?" And there was this silence on the phone. And then she said, "Oh my God, Rochelle didn't tell you. My father had a funeral. People came. His co-workers from the garage where he worked for 19 years. His neighbors. His church. And I wasn't there. My daughter, his granddaughter that he never got to meet, wasn't there. And now I want to pause, because I know some of you are already thinking about what you would do. If you found out that the person who was supposed to protect you was actually the one standing between you and someone who loved you, what would you do with that? Would you confront her? Would you walk away? Would you burn it all down? Tell me, because I'm about to tell you what I chose. And I'm still not sure I got it right. Because what happened next? What Rochelle said when I finally confronted her? It was worse than the letters. It was worse than missing the funeral. It was the thing she said about Margot that I will carry for the rest of my life. But that comes later. I read every letter, all 31 of them. It took me 4 days because I could only get through 2 or 3 at a time before I had to stop. The first one, July 1999, was short. He said he missed me. He said the apartment in Chattanooga was small and quiet. He said he put a picture of me on the refrigerator, the one from my 3rd grade school photo with the missing front tooth. He said he was going to write to me every few months, and he hoped my mom would give me the letters. Letter number 7, April 2002. He said he'd driven to Nashville and sat in the parking lot of my elementary school, Hamilton Creek Elementary, on Robertson Road. He watched kids come out at 3:15 and tried to spot me. He said he thought he saw me but wasn't sure. He said he almost got out of the car but was afraid of scaring me. Letter 12, November 2005. He knew I was in 8th grade somehow. He congratulated me on something. I think Aunt Gemma was feeding him information. He said he hoped I was taking pictures. He remembered me borrowing his disposable camera once when I was 7 and using the whole roll on the neighbor's cat. He remembered that. I barely remembered that, but he did. Letter 15, August 2008. And I have to tell you about this one because it caught me off guard. It was mostly about him trying to learn to cook. He spent half a page describing how he nearly burned down his apartment making fried chicken because he forgot the oil was on high and had to throw a lid on the pan while his smoke detector screamed at him. He wrote, "I'm a 50-year-old man eating cereal for dinner 3 nights a week because the stove scares me, Layla." And I laughed. I was sitting on my living room floor with tears running down my face, and I laughed out loud because that was him. That was my father. Honest and a little ridiculous and so human it hurt. Letter 19, June 2012. This one gutted me. He said he'd tried to get a lawyer, a man named Phil Buckley in Chattanooga. He wanted to petition the court for visitation rights, but Phil told him that since the original custody agreement gave Rochelle full custody and he'd signed away visitation in the divorce, it would be an uphill battle. He didn't have the money to fight it. He signed away visitation. And for days, I was furious at him too. He signed it. He had a choice. Part of me wanted to scream at a dead man for giving up the legal right to be in my life. But then I called Gemma, and Gemma told me the rest. He signed it because Rochelle told him she would make the divorce ugly if he didn't. She told him she'd tell the court he was violent. He wasn't. He never raised a hand to anyone. But he was terrified, and he didn't have money for a lawyer, and Rochelle knew that. She knew a man making $12 an hour couldn't fight a custody battle against a woman who had her mother, her sister, and the entire church ready to testify. So he signed, and Rochelle spent 25 years punishing me for being sad about a silence she engineered. I called Gemma again the next day, told her about the rest of the letters. She cried. She said she'd been trying to tell me for years, but Rochelle had convinced the whole family that Gemma was unstable and bitter about the divorce. My grandmother, Rochelle's mother, told Gemma at one point that if she didn't stop stirring up trouble, she wouldn't be welcome at family events anymore. And Gemma, who was a 58-year-old retired school teacher living in Murfreesboro, backed off. Because that's what Rochelle's world did to people. It made the truth-tellers look crazy, and the liars look like saints. I need to pause here, because I know there are people listening right now who are sitting with a version of this. Maybe you found something you weren't supposed to find. Maybe you're reading between the lines of a story someone told you your whole life, and the math doesn't add up anymore. When someone takes your ability to make your own choice about loving somebody, is that protection or is that control? And where's the line? Drop it in the comments. Because what happened next? The dinner where Rochelle said the thing about Margot. That's the moment I stopped wondering where the line was. It was a Sunday, April 7th, 2024. Rochelle had invited the family for dinner at her house. Me, Daphne, my grandmother, my Aunt Pauline, a few cousins. She did this every couple months. The Rochelle Pickens family dinner. White tablecloth, real dishes, candles, the whole production. I hadn't said a word about the letters yet. Not to Daphne, not to my grandmother, not to anyone except Nolan and Gemma. I was still processing. I was still reading them. I was still sitting in my car in parking lots crying before photo shoots because letter 23 talked about how he imagined my wedding and wondered if anyone walked me down the aisle. Nobody did. Nolan's father stood with us, but my aisle was empty. At dinner, Daphne was talking about the new produce section at the Kroger on Gallatin, and Aunt Pauline was asking if anyone had tried those sparkling water things that taste like cucumber. Normal dinner noise. Forks on plates. Rochelle passing the bread basket. Then Daphne mentioned that Margot had been talking about a school art project. She'd drawn a picture of our family. Me, Nolan, Margot, and then a separate figure off to the side. When her teacher asked who the separate person was, Margot said, "That's the grandpa I never met." The table went quiet, and Rochelle, who was pouring sweet tea like nothing in the world was wrong, set down the pitcher and said, with this gentle little laugh, "That child is picking up your obsession, Layla. You've been filling her head with some fantasy about Warren, and now she's drawing him like he's some ghost in the family. It's not healthy. You need to let that go. For her sake, if not your own. A good mother doesn't pass her damage to her daughter. A good mother. A good mother doesn't pass her damage to her daughter." She said that. To me. About my 5-year-old. In front of 8 family members. And my grandmother. Sweet old Vivian, sitting at the head of the table, nodded. She nodded and said, "Rochelle's right, baby. Some things are better left alone." I looked at Daphne. Nothing. She just cut her chicken and didn't look up. And I sat there, holding my fork. And I thought about 31 letters in a shoebox. I thought about September 3rd, 2023. In case this is the one you finally read. I thought about Margot drawing a grandfather she'd never met, trying to make space for him in our family picture, because nobody else would. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I wasn't ready. But I was done being quiet. I just needed to figure out how. Subscribe. Like this. The memorial is next. And you need to hear what happened. Because the memorial was 17 days away. And I was holding 31 letters that proved every word Rochelle just said was a lie. The question wasn't whether to speak. It was whether Daphne, who was sitting across from me cutting her chicken like the world hadn't just shifted, would ever look at me the same way after I did. Gemma was the one who suggested the memorial. Warren had been cremated. His ashes were with Gemma. She'd handled everything since I wasn't there, and Rochelle certainly wasn't going to help. But there had been no proper goodbye. Not for me. Not for Margot. Not for anyone on our side who actually loved him. Gemma proposed a small gathering. April 24th, 2024. Her backyard in Murfreesboro. She said we could invite whoever we wanted. Keep it intimate. And that's when I made the decision that I'm still not sure about. I told Gemma I wanted to invite the whole family. Rochelle, Daphne, my grandmother, Aunt Pauline, everyone. I told her I wanted them to hear what Warren had to say. I wanted to read one of the letters, maybe the last one, out loud. Gemma went quiet on the phone. Then she said, "Are you sure, sweetheart? Because once you do that, you can't undo it." I said, "She already undid it, Gemma. 25 years ago. Nolan backed me. He didn't try to talk me out of it. He just said, 'Whatever you need. I'll be right there.' That man doesn't say a lot, but when he does, He means every word. I called Daphne first, told her about the memorial. She was hesitant. She didn't really have feelings about Warren one way or the other, which is its own kind of tragedy. But she said she'd come. I told Rochelle it was a family gathering at Gemma's. I didn't say memorial. I said gathering. And Rochelle said, "At Gemma's? I suppose I can make an appearance." She still thought she was in control. She still thought this was her story to manage. I picked the letter I was going to read. Not the last one. That one was too private. Too much Layla Bird and banana songs and things I needed to keep for myself. I picked letter 24, dated March 15th, 2018. The one where he talked about the night I was born. He described being in the delivery room, the hospital, Nashville General, room 207. He said I came out screaming like I was already arguing with the world. He said he held me, and my eyes were open and I looked right at him. And he whispered, "Hey, Layla Bird, I'm your daddy, and I'm not going anywhere." He wrote that in 2018, 19 years after the divorce, still holding on to the memory of the first thing he ever said to me, still remembering room 207, still calling me Layla Bird. And she kept it in a shoebox behind a humidifier. You can't steal someone's love. You can hide the evidence of it. You can block the phone calls and intercept the letters and rewrite the story until nobody remembers the original. But you can't make it not exist. That's what Rochelle never understood. There's a difference between someone who leaves and someone who's pushed out. My mother spent 25 years making sure I couldn't tell the difference. But I know now. I know the difference now. The morning of the memorial, I stood at the kitchen counter with my coffee going cold and the letter in my hand. Margot was still asleep. The weight of it was physical, not the paper, but what was about to happen to every relationship I had once I unfolded it. If you were me, if you had that letter in your pocket and you were about to read it in front of the woman who hid it from you, would you go through with it? Or would you keep the peace? Tell me in the comments, because I genuinely don't know if what I did was brave or reckless. Drop your answer. I want to know. Because what happened in Gemma's backyard that afternoon made 13 people go completely silent. And one of them still hasn't spoken to me. April 24th, 2024. 71 degrees, clear sky. Gemma's backyard in Murfreesboro. Gemma had set up folding chairs in a half circle on the grass. There was a small table with Warren's ashes in a blue ceramic urn, a framed photo from 1997, him holding me at my 4th birthday, both of us covered in cake frosting, and a jar of wildflowers Margot had picked that morning from the edge of the property. 13 people came. Gemma, her son, my cousin Theo, 3 of Warren's old co-workers from Keller's Auto on Broad Street in Chattanooga, Nolan with Margot on his hip, and then the people I'd invited. Rochelle, Daphne, my grandmother Vivian, Aunt Pauline, 2 of my cousins on Rochelle's side. Rochelle arrived last. Sunglasses on, black cardigan. She hugged Gemma, stiff, performative, and sat down in the back row like she was doing everyone a favor by showing up. People spoke. Gemma told stories about Warren as a kid, how he used to catch crawdads in the creek behind their grandparents' house. One of his co-workers, a heavy-set man named Dale, said Warren was the most honest mechanic he'd ever worked with, and that customers used to specifically request him. Theo read a passage from a book Warren had loved. Then there was a pause. One of those silences where everybody's looking at their hands, waiting for someone else to go next. Gemma looked at me and nodded. I stood up. My hands were shaking. I had the letter in my jacket pocket. I fumbled, getting it out. The fold caught on the lining. Nolan put his hand on the small of my back. I looked at the photo of my father, cake frosting on his chin, grinning like he'd won the lottery, and I said, "Most of you knew my dad better than I did, and until 9 weeks ago, I thought that was because he chose to leave. But I found something recently, something that changes everything I thought I knew." I pulled out the letter. Rochelle sat up straighter. This is a letter my father wrote to me on March 15th, 2018. I never received it. It was one of 31 letters he wrote to me over 25 years. Every single one was intercepted and hidden. I found them in a closet, unopened. The yard was quiet. I could hear a bird somewhere behind Gemma's fence. Rochelle said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Layla, this is not the time or place." I said, "When was the time, Mom? When was the place? Because you had 25 years to give me these." And I opened the letter, and I read it. Dear Layla, today you turn 24 years old. I know this because I have never forgotten the day you were born. Nashville General, room 207. You came out screaming. I held you and I whispered, "Hey, Layla Bird, I'm your daddy, and I'm not going anywhere." I broke that promise. Not by choice, but I broke it, and I carry that every single day. My voice cracked. No one moved closer. Margot had gone still in his arms, watching me with wide eyes. I kept going. I don't know what your mother told you about me. I know she has her reasons, but I need you to know that I called. I wrote. I drove to Nashville 7 times. Once I sat in the parking lot of your elementary school and watched kids come out, and I thought I saw you, but I wasn't sure. I came to the house in 2004, and she called the police. I was not violent. I was just trying to see my daughter. I'm not writing this to make you angry at her. I'm writing this because if I die and you never read a single one of my letters, I need to at least write the truth somewhere. You were wanted, Layla. Every single day. You were so wanted. I folded the letter. I looked up. Dale was crying. Big, quiet tears running into his beard. Gemma was crying. Theo had his hand over his mouth, and I felt all of it at once. The grief that my father was ash on a table instead of alive in that chair. The fury at the woman who made sure of that, and under it, this sick twist of guilt, because part of me knew I had just detonated something in front of people who didn't get a say in it, and under the guilt, relief. Like the truth was a physical thing I'd been carrying in my chest for months, and it was finally outside of me. And Rochelle stood up. She looked at me, not with guilt, not with shame, with fury. And she said, "You want to make a scene? Fine. Your father was a weak man who couldn't keep a job and couldn't keep a wife. Those letters don't prove he loved you. They prove he was lonely and selfish enough to try to use a child to feel better about himself. I did what I had to do to keep you safe from a man who would have let you down over and over again." I said, "He tried to see me and you called the police." She said, "Because he showed up unannounced. What was I supposed to do?" One of Rochelle's cousins, Denise, sitting in the second row, said quietly, almost to herself, she shouldn't have hidden the letters. But this, in front of everyone like this, and she wasn't wrong. I heard her, but I couldn't stop. And my grandmother Vivian, who hadn't spoken the entire time, looked at Rochelle and said, "You told me he never wrote." That's when it collapsed. Because Rochelle had told everyone the same story. No calls, no letters, no effort. And now 13 people were looking at her and realizing that the monument she'd built for 25 years was a lie. Rochelle grabbed her purse. She pointed at me and said, "You're going to regret this, Layla. You think you're honoring him? You're destroying this family." I looked at her, and I said, quiet, steady, barely above speaking volume, "You hid his love from me. That's all you did for 25 years. She didn't answer. She turned and walked out, got in her car, and left. Nobody followed her. That was the part I wasn't expecting. I thought at least Daphne would go after her. or my grandmother, or Aunt Pauline. But nobody moved. They just sat there. And the silence had this weight to it, like everyone was rearranging 25 years of memories in real time. Before I get to what everyone else did, I need to tell you what happened right after Rochelle's car pulled out of the driveway, because I did something I'm not proud of. I walked inside Gemma's house, told Nolan I needed a minute, went into the bathroom and locked the door. And I sat on the edge of the bathtub and shook. Not cried, shook. My whole body was vibrating like I'd touched a live wire. I pressed my hands flat against my knees and tried to breathe, and I couldn't get a full breath in. I kept seeing Rochelle's face. Not the furious one from just now, but the one from Thanksgiving when I was 11. The pitying smile, the one he actually wanted. And I wanted to scream, but Margot was 20 feet away, so I pressed my face into a towel and made this sound, this ugly animal sound that I didn't know I had in me. Nolan knocked after about 5 minutes. Didn't say anything, just knocked once, quiet, so I knew he was there. I splashed water on my face, came back out. Margot ran up to me and said, "Mommy, why did that lady leave so fast?" And I picked her up and said, "She had to go, baby." And I held her so tight, she said, "Too squeezy, Mama." Daphne was the first to really speak after that. She said, "How many letters?" And I said, 31. And she said, "Were any of them for me?" There weren't. Daphne was 5 when he left. She didn't know him. And Warren, in his letters, mentioned Daphne a few times, but always through the lens of regret. He said he'd missed the window with her. He said Rochelle had been pregnant with Daphne when things started falling apart, and by the time the divorce was done, Daphne didn't know his face. Daphne nodded when I told her. She didn't cry. She just said, "Okay," and looked at the urn on the table. And then she said, "I didn't even know what he looked like until today." She was looking at the framed photo, his birthday cake face. She was meeting her father at his memorial, through a picture frame, at 29 years old. My grandmother came to me afterward. She didn't come over trembling with a confession ready. She came over and started talking about the drive from Nashville, how the traffic on I-24 had been terrible. She straightened the wildflowers in the jar. She adjusted her chair. And then, still not looking at me, she said, "I should have listened to Gemma. Back in 2002. I should have asked more questions." Then she did look at me. Her hands were shaking. "Rochelle told me he disappeared, Layla. She said he didn't want anything to do with you girls. And I believed my daughter. That's what mothers do. And I wanted to say something about what mothers do. I wanted to say that what mothers do is apparently whatever the hell they want with the truth. But she was 81 years old, and she was standing in a backyard realizing her daughter had lied to her for a quarter century, and there was nothing I could say to her that she wasn't already saying to herself. That's how family lies work. Nobody has to be in on it. They just have to not look too hard. Aunt Pauline pulled me aside as people were leaving. She said, "I need to tell you something." She fidgeted with her purse strap, started talking about the drive home, then stopped herself, took a breath. She said that in 2007, she answered Rochelle's phone by accident while Rochelle was in the bathroom. A man's voice asked for Layla. Pauline said, "She's not here. Who's calling?" And the voice said, "Her father." Pauline hung up and told Rochelle. And Rochelle said, "That's been handled. Don't worry about it." But that wasn't all. Pauline said she almost told me, in 2016, at my wedding. She'd had 2 glasses of wine and she found me in the hallway before the ceremony, and she opened her mouth to say something, and then Rochelle appeared like she had radar, pulled Pauline aside and said, "Don't you dare. Not today." And Pauline didn't. She went back to her seat, watched me walk down an empty aisle, and said nothing. Handled, like my father was a billing dispute, like his voice on the phone, asking for his daughter, was an inconvenience that needed to be managed. Pauline said she didn't think much of it at the time. She said, Rochelle always seemed like she had it under control. And that was the whole system. Rochelle seemed like she had it under control, so nobody questioned whether control was the same thing as truth. But here's the part that really broke something in me. Gemma told me that in 2010, Warren drove to Nashville one more time. He went to Rochelle's house. He begged. He said, "Please, Rochelle, just let me see her for an hour. She's 16. She should know her father." And Rochelle said, "She doesn't want to know you, Warren. She's fine. She's happy. You showing up would only confuse her." He left, and he never came back to Nashville again. She told him I didn't want him. She told me he never tried. 2 lies aimed at 2 people who loved each other, keeping them apart for 16 more years. If I'd known at 16 that my father was standing on the porch asking to see me, I would have run to him. I know I would have. But I never got the chance. And I never will. Because he died in a hospital in Chattanooga on September 14th, 2023. The last thing Daphne said to me before she left the memorial was, "Do you think he was scared?" at the end? And I didn't have an answer. I still don't. In the weeks after the memorial, the family fractured. Not loud, not dramatic, just slow and permanent, like water finding cracks in concrete. Rochelle called Daphne twice. Daphne didn't pick up. That was new. Daphne always picked up. But something had changed for her at that gathering. She told me later that she kept thinking about Margot's drawing, the grandpa off to the side. She said, "That should have been real, Layla. She should have known him." My grandmother went to see Rochelle about a week after the gathering. It didn't go well. Rochelle spent the entire visit telling Vivian that I had ambushed her, that I had humiliated her in front of Warren's people, that I was choosing a dead man over my own mother. Vivian said she tried to ask about the letters, and Rochelle changed the subject 3 times. Rochelle never apologized. Not to me, not to Daphne, not to Gemma. She reframed the whole thing. In her version, she was the victim. In her version, I was an ungrateful daughter who staged a public attack. She told Aunt Pauline that I had clearly been talking to Gemma behind her back for years, which wasn't true. I'd only reconnected with Gemma after finding the letters. But that was Rochelle's superpower. She could look you in the eye and redraw the entire map and make you feel like you'd been standing in the wrong place all along. 4 months passed. May turned to June, June to July. I stopped going to Sunday dinners. Daphne stopped too. The white tablecloth stayed folded. The candles stayed unlit. I took Margot to Gemma's house in Murfreesboro 6 times that summer. We'd sit on the porch and Gemma would tell stories about Warren, the Crawdad Creek, the time he tried to fix the neighbor's motorcycle and it rolled down the driveway into a bush, the way he laughed, big and sudden, like a bark. Margot would sit in Gemma's lap and say, "Tell me another grandpa story." And Gemma would smile and say, "I got 100 of them, baby girl." That's the thing Rochelle could never destroy. The actual man. She could hide the letters. She could block the calls. She could rewrite the history. But she couldn't erase who Warren was, because the people who loved him still carried him. And now, so did Margot. I started seeing a therapist, a woman on West End Avenue, every Wednesday at 10 a.m. In our 3rd session, she asked me a question that stopped me cold. She said, "Who told you that being angry at your mother meant you didn't love her?" And I didn't have an answer. Because the truth is, I do love her. That's the part that makes it unbearable. I love a woman who stole 25 years of my father's love from me. I love the woman who hid 31 letters. I love the person who told my father I didn't want him, and then told me he never tried. And I hate that I love her. And I love her anyway. I don't know what to do with that. My therapist says I don't have to know right now. But some nights, after Margot is asleep and Nolan is reading in bed and the apartment is quiet, I sit on the floor and I hold those letters and I think about the two people who should have loved me the most, and how one of them tried so hard it fills a shoebox, and the other one made sure I'd never know. It's January now, 2025, 9 months since the memorial. Rochelle and I haven't spoken since August. She sent me a text on my birthday in October. "Happy birthday, Layla. I'm still your mother." I read it. I didn't respond. Not because I'm punishing her. I just didn't know what to say. I still don't. Daphne and I are closer than we've ever been. She came with me to Chattanooga in November. We visited the garage where Warren worked. It's still there. Keller's Auto on Broad Street. Dale, the big guy who cried at the memorial, he took us around back and showed us Warren's old workstation. His name was still on the toolbox. Nobody had moved it. Dale said, "We figured one of his girls would come for it eventually." I took a photo of the toolbox. Warren Pickens, written in white paint pen on the side. Scratched up. Real. I printed it and put it in a frame on our bookshelf at home, right next to the cake frosting photo. Margot doesn't draw the grandfather off to the side anymore. She draws him in the middle now. Sometimes she draws him with wings. She asked me once if Grandpa could see her drawings from heaven. I said, "Baby, I think he's been watching the whole time." Daphne told me something a few weeks ago that I'm still sitting with. She said, "I'm angry at her, but she was still our mother. She still showed up every day. She still drove us to school and made dinner and sat in the hospital when I broke my arm." I keep going back and forth. I told her she didn't have to pick one, because Rochelle was both. The woman who destroyed something was the same woman who built something else. And I don't know what to do with that, either. Gemma gave me something last month. A voicemail. She'd saved it on an old phone she kept in a drawer. One of those flip phones from the mid-2000s. She'd charged it up and played it for me. It was Warren. December 2006. His voice was deeper than I expected. A little gravelly. He said, "Gemma, it's Warren. I sent another letter today. I think it's number 9. I don't even know if Rochelle's throwing them away or what, but I can't stop writing to her. I can't stop. She's my kid, Gem." That's the only recording I have of my father's voice. 14 seconds on a flip phone voicemail from 2006. And I've listened to it maybe 200 times. She's my kid, Gem. I can't stop. I want to say something to you. If you've been here this whole time, and I know some of you have been here from the first sentence, thank you. I mean that. This story is the hardest thing I've ever told out loud. Harder than the letters. Harder than the memorial. Because the letters were between me and him, and the memorial was between me and her. But this is between me and you stayed. If this story reached something in you, if it made you think about someone you lost, or someone who tried to reach you, or someone you need to reach, I'm asking you to hit that subscribe button. Not for me. For the next person who needs to hear a story like this at 2 a.m. when the house is quiet and they're wondering if anyone understands. Hit like so this reaches them. And if you've got a story about letters that were never sent, or calls that were never answered, or years that someone stole from you and someone who loved you, put it in the comments. I will read every single one. Is there someone in your life right now? Someone you've been meaning to call, someone you've been meaning to forgive, someone you've been meaning to let go of. Who came to mind while you listened to this? Tell me about them. I want to know. And if you want to hear more stories like this, Stories about women who survived the people who were supposed to love them the most. The next one is already waiting for you on this channel. Click it. You won't regret it. I still have 31 letters in a shoebox in my closet. I read one every few weeks. Not in order anymore. I just pick one when I need him. And it's enough. It's not what I should have had. It's not phone calls and Thanksgivings, and him walking me down the aisle and holding Margot for the first time. It's ink on paper. It's a dead man's handwriting. But it's his. And it was always meant for me. It's Tuesday night. Margot is asleep. Nolan is reading next to me. And I'm holding letter number 14. February 2008. The one where he talks about learning to cook spaghetti because it was my favorite when I was little. The apartment is quiet. The letter smells like old paper. And for the first time in 25 years, my father is in the room with me. Grief isn't the price of love. It's the proof.